Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to another episode of MC Commute. You guys know the deal. Today we're going to be riding to the motorcyclist office in Southern California on Suzuki's 2019 SV650X. So let's put the helmet on and go for a ride. Alright guys, here it is, Suzuki's 2019 SV650X. This is a new café-racer-inspired motorcycle from Suzuki based on its venerable SV650. This motorcycle's been, the SV650 has been around in Suzuki's lineup for many decades. And it's a fantastic motorcycle. It's got the right combination of packaging, weight, size, power, performance, character, styling. What I really like about this X Cafe Racer version is how Suzuki was really able to differentiate the SV650 and the X just visually. I like that front cowl that encapsulates the halogen headlight up top. This body panel's also specific to the SV650X. Look at that seat, that two-tone rib seat. Looks very nice, very premium quality. This is a nice looking motorcycle. It's very tasteful too in this particular paint job. I do like it. But enough talking about it. Let's hop on it and see what it's like to ride. Alright guys, here we go. What do you think of the sound? Sounds a little bit barky for a 645cc V-twin. I'm very happy today. We're riding another motorcycle with very little electronics. All this bike has is ABS, which is always on and fixed, but we'll get to that in a minute. Ergonomically, this bike, as all SV650s are very comfortable. Suzuki really nailed the ergonomics of these bikes when they first came out with them, and over the years they've just steadily honed the ergonomics, and for a 6-foot tall rider it's a pretty comfortable cockpit. It's a little bit more, I'm not going to say cramped, but small rider oriented. If you're a smaller person, you're probably going to fit on it even better. The seat height's super low. This X version has a seat that's just a smidge taller than the standard SV650. I think it's 0.2 of an inch taller, but I can easily put both feet on the ground at a stop. And if you were a smaller rider, I would definitely recommend this bike, just because the seat height's low, it's exceptionally narrow. It doesn't feel that long. Even though it weighs 437 pounds, it doesn't feel that heavy, not even close. It's nice, we got a green light. And away we go. Let's open up that 645cc V-twin. And I've always liked the engine in these Suzukis. This V-twins kind of get the best of both worlds. It has good bottom end and mid-range power, decent top end, and it just sounds cool. It's different. It's got that guttural V-twin sound to it. It's got a little bit of vibration, which makes you feel like you're alive and riding a motorcycle, but the vibration isn't so overpowering that it makes you feel like you're riding some not such a high quality machine. Like, this is a very well engineered engine. It's important to note that just a couple years ago, for the 2017 model year, Suzuki actually overhauled this engine. Now, I know aesthetically it looks the same and the specs are all the same, but they went inside and redesigned a number of parts. I believe, if my memory recalls, it was about 60 parts that they redesigned. And they did that just to give the engine greater efficiency, a little bit more torque, a little bit more power, and just be more efficient. That's kind of how Suzuki always updates their bikes and their engines. They kind of stick to their concept, their platform, and then they make evolutionary adjustments just to update it. It's quite a bit different strategy than many of the other major motorcycle manufacturers when it comes to motorcycle evolution. And it's not a bad thing, it's just different. It's actually kind of neat how Suzuki always sticks to its guns. This motorcycle is super skinny, so we can just navigate through this dense California traffic so easily. Compared to the standard SV650 with its handlebar, this thing has a pair of clip-ons mounted below the top triple clamp. And that's the only change ergonomically versus the SV650, is just these clip-ons versus the handlebar. And it does equate to a more aggressive riding stance, but it isn't overdone. I think you're in a position that you could ride this thing around town and be quite comfortable on. Yet when you're coming into the corners or into the canyons, you have a little bit more of a sporty stance. Again, it's not dramatically different than the SV650, but it is more aggressive. Besides that, and this 0.2 of an inch higher seat, that's it. But overall, a very comfortable bike. Good power to escape stoplights. Engine sounds pretty cool too, for having the stock muffler. Ooh, a corner, yes. Love corners. And the suspension on this bike is very composed. The chassis is composed. Here's the bumpy stretch of road. This will always sort out the good suspension from the bad, and it actually soaks up the rough stuff very well. It's easy to knock Suzuki for continuing to use this rather old style telescopic fork instead of an inverted piece, but the truth is it works really good. This thing has a nice ride balance between everyday comfort, soaking up the rough stuff, and having a high degree of sport aptitude in the canyons. You could ride this bike very hard in the canyons, and it delivers. The suspension is not going to be as firm as a Ducati Panigale V4, but it's not going to be as bouncy as other bikes in its class. If you're a real rider who likes to rip in the canyons and still wants to have a good degree of everyday comfort, you're going to like the chassis and suspension on this bike a lot. It's important to note this SV650X features adjusters atop the fork, so you can actually adjust the spring preload of the fork. So adjusters on top of the fork, so you can adjust the spring preload, and that basically adds tension to the fork and changes the ride height. Also changes the way the spring works when you're compressing it with the front brake. It's a nice change if you ride really hard and use a lot of front brake and want the bike to be a little bit more raised. You'd add some preload. Conversely, if you're a little bit lighter or you don't use the front brakes that hard, you can take a little bit out. So it's a nice touch. I wonder why Suzuki just doesn't add that to all the SVs. We talked a little bit about this front fairing. It's actually mounted to the triple clamp. There's a bracket that attaches this fairing using the upper and lower triple clamps, so that's how it's mounted. Instrumentation, this is the same as the SV650. It's also the same as the GSX-S1000. A nice digital readout. Very clean looking. Looks clean. Easy to read. I wish it had a temperature gauge. That's my only gripe. I remember the old Suzuki GSX-Rs had a temperature gauge, and I really liked that. And I was thumbing through this, and it didn't have that. But it does have average Mpg and range, which is nice. We've been averaging 43.3 miles per gallon, which is pretty good considering the spirited pace that we ride this bike at. This bike's pretty nimble. It's got some length to it, it's got some wheelbase to it. It's not the shortest motorcycle from front to back, yet it still turns fairly well. It's not the most agile, though. I mean, it's certainly not agile, it definitely turns, but there's definitely bikes that are a little bit more agile at this speed. But at the same time, I like the extra bit of wheelbase this bike has, because it just makes it more stable, and when you're ripping around turns, the chassis is just more planted and it's not as flighty. So I would actually give up a little bit of that low speed agility for having that greater stability and road handling when you're wailing. Another important change this bike has compared to the SV650 is this front brake master cylinder. It's got a reservoir-type master cylinder. It's not radial mount, it's axial pump, or not radial pump, it's axial pump style, so that when you press the brake lever, it pushes the piston right here instead of right there. So, you know, radial mount master cylinder always just gives more power, and more power is always a good thing in my book, but it's still neat that it has this reservoir type master cylinder. It looks good. The front brake calipers are also overhauled. Now, for years and years and years, the SV650 came with these dinky two-piston calipers, and even when Suzuki redesigned the bike in 2017, they continued using these dinky calipers. Well, enough's enough, and this 2019 SV650X has these calipers, and the SV650 and SV650 ABS will also have these new calipers for 2020. So nice change. Braking power and feel is up. The old bike could never do a nose wheelie ever. Impossible, basically. Oh, if you used all your 3 or 4 fingers, it could do a nose wheelie, but now I'm sure these brakes would be up for the challenge more easily. Brake lever has a ton of adjustment in it. 5 positions, so you can move the brake lever forward or backward based on the size of your hands. I've got smaller hands, so I always move the lever closer to the clip-on. It just makes it easier to touch when I need to. Alright guys, another turn. We're balked though, unfortunately. We've got some traffic ahead of us. Sneak to the front of the line here. Green light, awesome. We'll go. On the dyno, this bike puts out right around 68 horsepower, if my memory serves correctly. 68 horsepower and almost 43 pound-foot of torque. And the good thing about the torque curve is it comes online so early, right at 3,000 RPM. 3,000 RPM, it's making a decent amount of torque. It's not quite 40, but it's 35. And then around 5,000 RPMs, it's putting out upwards of 40, and it carries that all the way to redline. So for being a mid-size displacement twin, this thing has a lot of grunt. And that grunt just helps you accelerate and just jump off the corner no matter where you're at in the power band. Right now we're in top gear, 6th gear, 60 miles per hour at just over 4,000 RPM. A little bit of engine vibration, but it's really the good kind. It makes you feel like you're riding a motorcycle with good character. Speaking of the exhaust, Suzuki actually updated the exhaust shield, so this bike has a little bit more ground clearance. So when you're going around right turns and you're really banking the bike over, the previous muffler could touch. I never had it touch, but I guess some guys had it touch somehow. Well, Suzuki's redesigned that muffler cover so it's tucked up a little higher. So now you can go even harder into right turns. Wish we could test that feature right now, but we're balked again by this vehicle. This bike rides on Dunlop's Road Smart 3 tire. This is a more high-performance based sport touring tire, so it's designed for sport touring and a little bit more mileage, but it still has some decent performance in it. So it's nice to see Dunlop or Suzuki coming with a high-quality tire on their bikes. For years they used an older Dunlop tire, and I'm happy they've gotten rid of that older tire and switched to something more contemporary. Don't think we talked about the clutch, but the cable actuated clutch, it has a little bit of lever pull. It might not be as new rider friendly as some other bikes, but at the same time I like how well weighted the clutch is. It requires a little bit of effort to use, which is nice. Of course the action of it is real accurate. It's easy to get a feel for, as long as you can get comfortable with the amount of tension it takes to pull it. Gearbox shifts smoothly, but it does take a little bit more effort to make a gear shift. The gear shift, the transmission feels a little bit more, just not quite as cut in as some other bikes' new transmissions. A lot of the new bikes, they just shift so smooth up and down, and this thing, it's not that it's not smooth, it just takes a little bit more effort to click in gear. And when I'm saying like a little bit, it's such a small amount that most people won't even be able to tell the difference, I'm sure. But it's probably just the older design of this transmission. You got to remember that this bike is, even though it's been updated, it's an older bike in Suzuki's arsenal, which again isn't a bad thing. Alright guys, we're approaching the motorcyclist office. So the SV650X rings in at $8,400. That's $1,300 more than the standard SV650, and I think $1,000 more than the SV650 ABS. So for that extra $1,400, you get cool front fairing, nice seat, additional body panel, new brakes, clip-on style handlebars. I think this bike's pretty cool. I would probably opt for just a standard SV650. Oh, we gotta do our wheelie test, guys. Yeah, she does good wheelies. Let's do it again. Yep, good wheelies. Good job, Suzuki. Back to the test, we have ABS always on fixed. You can't turn it off. Yep, no backing it in, guys. No backing it in. If we didn't have ABS, this thing would probably back in real good. But $8,400 for this, would I spend the extra $1,300 versus the standard SV650? I probably wouldn't. I would just get the standard SV650 and save a little bit of money. Yeah, this clip-on style handlebars does equate to a more aggressive riding position, albeit not by much, but it is a little bit more. Yeah, I do like the styling and aesthetics of this bike, but Probably the standard's what I go with. Alright guys, here we are with the motorcyclist office. Here it is guys, the 2019 SV650X. If you want to know more about this motorcycle, hop on to cycleworld.com. They've recently published a written review of this bike. Additionally, hop on to motorcyclistonline.com where you can read reviews. I'm sorry, not reviews, but previews where we talk about the specification and the differences of this bike versus the SV650. If you prefer to read that, go into motorcyclistonline.com, search SV650X. Let's have some Q&A, guys. A little Q&A. Where is the... Here it is. Alright, a little Q&A. It's always fun. Let's go to the very top. How does the handlebar ergos compare with the standard SV? Asks Undiscovered Ace. Well, we talked about that a little bit earlier. The handlebar, just the clip-on style handlebar, equates to a little bit more aggressive riding position. It's not overdone. If you're a rider who's still going to ride in the city and commute and go around town, I don't think this handlebar is going to be make it uncomfortable for you. It's just going to make things a little bit better when you're riding in the canyons. So good job Suzuki as always with a good balance between performance and comfort. Regular SV versus X, differences and pros and cons. We addressed that in the video, so we're going to skip that one. Cruising at 100 miles per hour bearable. Yeah, I mean, this thing's strung out at 100 miles per hour a little bit. I mean, but you could cruise at 100 miles per hour on this thing. 90 miles per hour is more the sweet spot. Real world fuel economy, we talked about that. I think 44.2 mpgs, and that's with a lot of whaling. Another good question. Would you rather have this or the Kawasaki Z900 RS? Those bikes are very much different. I don't really know if you can compare them. One has a 4-cylinder engine, one has a V-twin. I would probably go with this bike just because it's a lot less expensive, and you're going to be doing basically the same kind of stuff. So, interesting question. Do one more question here. Is the bike great for daily commute? I'd say so. I'd say SV650s are always pretty good at commuting and just doing everything. That's why I've always liked that bike. It's good for riding around town to get coffee. It's good to put a girl on the back. It's good for doing a track down. It's good for going in the canyons. It's just a very versatile bike that you can literally do everything with. That's why these bikes have gotten so popular over the years. Not so much now, but back in the day, they would sell like hotcakes, and that's just because they were so versatile. Well, there you have it, guys. That's our MC Commute review of the 2019 SV650X. If I was in the market for a mid-sized café-racer-inspired bike, I would definitely consider this motorcycle. It handles excellently. Engine's fun and playful. It sounds cool. Ergonomics are very well balanced. It looks neat. You know, yes, it's a little bit older of a motorcycle, even though it was updated in 2017. But the price is good, and it's just a great bike that works really well.